Thank you, Horace. I think that is all I have to say, the questions I have to ask. I guess just in terms of the instances that did lead to this, and I think it was you, Mark, who said a couple of instances have blown this all out of proportion. And I think that, and I think I'm paraphrasing you. If I'm not adequately representing you, please say so. That you're being asked to pay for a couple of high publicity, some public events that were captured. How would your community feel about those images that were on the 7:30 report? Has there been discussion in your community about that?
It's got nothing to do with my community, what them guys do up there. It's more about what happens on my country. I'm not going to tell them fellas what they do. They don't tell us what to do. That's their business. That's our business. That's our culture. Just think, if the cameras weren't there, we wouldn't be here. That's something I've said on, I was on TV at NITV. If the cameras aren't there, they don't see. So we need to prevent some of these people that come into our community from going where they need not go.
We've got to accept though, Mark, that the world now, everyone has a camera. You've probably got one sitting in your phone in your pocket right now. And that's where the world is, and it does make it difficult, I realise. And look at the cattle issue overseas. It was because someone had a camera in a killing works. You know what I mean? And there are cameras, and people are going to be judged by what they see on cameras, unfortunately.
And that's fine. They always warn you before the next show comes on. There's all this stuff going to happen. Turn it off. Go somewhere else. Same thing. If you see me out on the water, take your boat and go somewhere else.
You got any more, Jack? All right, we might go back to the department now, I think, to... do you want us to respond to some of those comments that have been raised?
It's Jim Thompson here. I think there was probably a number of issues that were raised that probably require some input. First of those around the communities and the issue about the restriction, I think, would be handled by the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island Department. Other two were around religious slaughter exemption and who and how determines which techniques are used, and I think they probably require some input, and I'll get Marguerite to comment on those. I don't know if you want to start with the communities one. Hand over to Carmel for that.
Carmel Iblesi from the Department of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and Multicultural Affairs. I just thought I'd give a bit of background about Section 61. Section 61 provides an immunity for hunting and consuming marine fauna in basically a dogget community and in some regional council areas. The amendment will mean that that immunity from the provision of any other act will not apply unless the meat is consumed in the community, and it only relates to marine animals. That's just a point of clarification. I just want to make that clear. That's the effect of the amendment.
Is there any particular reason why that's been introduced?
I understand it's in response to concerns that there may be selling of turtle and dugong from the communities, so transporting and sale.
Yeah, just hold it. Just write your question down, and we'll ask it then.
Because if this is the case, then if we had turtles here, and I have to go over to Yarrabah to eat the turtle. Now this is, like this legislation at the moment is discriminatory, and now it's going to put something, impose another act, so that we can't consume our traditional food source in our traditional community. So the legislation now is going to define community, which again restricts and discriminates against us once again in regards to where the consumption is to be taking place. So the time frame is inadequate. The legislation is inadequate. In regards to
let's get to the response.
Mining, I suppose it was brought up by Melissa and many other people around the table here. The concern about what actually institute a humane kill.
Let's get a response to the community's questions first. Thanks. Right. Carmel?
Mr. Formal, it's Carmel Wybellis here again.
It's getting longer and longer drawn out in regards to this legislation, and if it gets passed. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Formal, it's Carmel Wybellis here from Datsumar again. Section 61 of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Land, Justice and Other Matters Act only applies to the particular communities, not all of Queensland. So in the case of if you were hunting off Cairns, I'm just looking at my specialist sitting at the back, if you were hunting in Cairns, this Section 61 wouldn't apply to you. But I accept that there needs to be further explanation around that section.
All right, thank you. You got any more you'd like to go through, Marguerite?
Yeah, Marguerite will cover off the other two issues that were raised. One was religious slaughter exemptions, and the other one was who determines what techniques are used.
Okay. One sec. Marguerite?
Okay, so just for those who aren't aware, Section 45 of the Animal Care and Protection Act provides an offence exemption if an animal is slaughtered for human food in accordance with religious faith. If it were not for that, then some forms of religious slaughter, for example slaughter without prior stunning, could constitute animal cruelty in Queensland. So although the exemption for slaughter for human food in accordance with religious faith has been in place since the Animal Care and Protection Act came into force in 2001, to date none of the registered meat processing facilities in Queensland have performed slaughtering practices in reliance on that exemption. Now currently there is some slaughter without prior stunning in accordance with the religious tradition in some other states of Australia. There's a national process under the Australian Animal Welfare Committee looking into religious slaughter and issues around religious slaughter and what standards should apply to religious slaughter. So that there is a separate policy process that's looking at that issue, and I guess I just wanted to clarify that is a separate process, and that there is none of the current meat processors in Queensland are slaughtering using without prior stunning.
Could I just bring in a question there? Which religious domination actually decides what is a religious slaughter? Because Aboriginal spirituality is a religion, and it's constituted by our lawmen, and a process that was there for thousands of years.
Yeah,
is it
look,
the Anglican?
I might get you. Who's that? Seith, is it?
Will make this.
Seith, is that? Who is that? John or Seith? Seith, I might get you to send us an email on that one, Seith, because it's probably outside the parameters that we're looking at today. We'll just continue on. Would you like? But Melissa again. Sorry, Melissa. Marguerite, she's got one more, and then you. Okay, then Richie.
Yes, sorry, I've just lost my spot. The other thing is that we wanted to talk about was how cruelty would be determined. So this has been raised a lot. Why isn't there a clear explanation of what will and won't be allowed? Our advice is that hunting practices for turtles and dugongs will vary from one community to another, And the intention's not to impose particular practices on communities, but to encourage communities to work with scientists, animal welfare groups and others to agree on what's reasonable in their circumstances while recognising tradition and custom. So I want to clarify that reasonableness is a term with an established legal meaning. It's used as a standard for determining liability across a lot of pieces of legislation. So this is not something that we've dreamt up, and it is currently used in the description of what constitutes cruelty for all Queenslanders. So it's not just in relation to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples. The courts have emphasised that the question of reasonableness needs to be measured according to the circumstances of the case. So there will be situations where something that might be reasonable for one person will not be reasonable for another person in a different set of circumstances. Rather than being specific about particular methods in the Act, and this is across a number of instances, the preferred approach is to provide guidance in other ways. So, say for example, in a number of animal industries, guidance on what's reasonable has often been worked out over a long period of time. It might begin, for example, with industries coming up with their own code of practice. Some of these have been formalised into voluntary standards that are adopted under the Animal Care and Protection Act, and in fact there's national processes now looking at making mandatory standards. But that doesn't mean that the general requirements to not to be cruel to animals haven't applied to those industries well before that guidance material wasn't worked out over time. So the preferred approach is not to put something prescriptive in the Animal Care and Protection Act across a whole range of industries and animal use situations, but to allow those things to be worked out over time, and as consensus develops, to make that guidance available. And that can take different forms in different situations, but that is an option here. Just one other point that came up that we wanted to cover off on is the concern about enforcement. Just as a general comment, that it isn't possible for the government to investigate every possible animal welfare offence. And promoting voluntary compliance, that's community-based compliance, is a fundamental base of the way that we encourage compliance with the Animal Care and Protection Act across the whole Queensland community. We're not proposing to take a different approach here. Even when an investigation identifies that there is some sort of animal welfare issue, it may be that activities designed to raise the awareness of people about that what they're doing is unacceptable, and to educate them as to alternative ways would be a better use of government resources than prosecuting them. I'm mentioning that because I want to emphasise that prosecution is not something that would be entered into lightly, and it's if you like, a last resort generally. The normal approach that we will be taking, and certainly for the first 6 months, it has been pointed out that we're talking about a 6-month grace period, that the normal approach would be that we would be working with people and we'll be encouraging communities to come up with, to interact with scientists and animal welfare groups and others to work on what is reasonable in their circumstances. So although there might be concern that this isn't exact enough and very specific about what is and isn't allowed, it actually provides the flexibility for that to be worked out and for people's individual traditions and customs to be taken into account in that working through process.